Go ahead and get started. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP, the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to build unity in the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connection. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host for the evening and board member, along with Beth Story in the Zoom room and Jennifer Falsing. We also have some board members with us tonight as well. Abby Hasbury, if you can wave at us, Abby. Rich Haas. I know Barb's not joining us tonight. Let's see, David's not joining us tonight. But anyway, just a shout out. We're glad to have all of you with us this evening. Also, if you're joining us for the very first time, please let us know. We'd like to know who is here for the, hi Robin and Andrea. We'd like to give you a special shout out. So please let us know by going ahead and leaving a comment in the chat bar. At this time, we just want to go over a little disclosure before we begin the evening. And Beth will pull this up for us in just a second. Or Jennifer, one of you.
Just a second, I had it. I'm looking.
Okay. Again, we'd like to remind everyone to please remain muted. If you do have a question for our guest, you're welcome to raise your virtual hand, or you can ask it in the chat room and we'll go ahead and call on you. Just feel free to post questions in the comment in the chat bar. This is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. This evening's portion is recorded and will be shared later on our YouTube channel. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Thank you, Beth. Okay, so it does give me the privilege to introduce to you this evening our special spotlight guest. Her name is Susan Divan Harness. She is the author of Bitter Root. Quite not finished with your book, but it's excellent. And let's just learn just a little bit about Susan. Did anybody see the TED Talk? I posted that again today. Yeah, Sarah's shaking her head. Yeah, it was great. Okay, Susan is a member of the Salish, and make sure, Susan, that I do pronounce this correctly. I'm going to Kutane. You're on mute. I'll let you can go ahead and go off of mute.
Kootenai.
Kootenai, the Kootenai tribes, a cultural anthropologist and adoptee and author of multiple award-winning book, Bitter Root, a Salish memoir of transracial adoption. She has written and presented extensively about American Indian assimilation policies, including child placement, both nationally and internationally. Bitter Root won both creative nonfiction and Indigenous Writers categories in the 2019 High Plains Book Awards, and more recently was awarded the Barbara Sedler Award for the best work of nonfiction or fiction on a Western American subject by a female author. Bitter Root has sold several thousand copies worldwide since its release in October 2018. Ms. Harness holds MAs in cultural anthropology, as well as creative nonfiction, both from Colorado State, where she is also an affiliate of the Department of Anthropology and Geography. Welcome, Susan, to Happy Hour.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. When you and I had talked, what was it, maybe 5 weeks ago or so, and I said, okay, I'm gonna do this talk, and it's gonna be called Out of the Riptide. And this has been one of the most difficult presentations I've concocted, mainly because I had kind of this idea of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to say and why I wanted to say it, but it's complicated. And so I'm just going to say, as adoptees or as adoptive parents, it's all complicated. And so this is no different. So what I wanted to do with Out of the Riptide is I wanted to begin a conversation of conversion. And by conversion, I mean from moving from one identity into another identity. I wanted to acknowledge people who are tired of the chaos. And it's the online social media chaos that is tiring. It's exhausting at times. I want to give people a way to think about trying to get out of that chaos through a roadmap or a guide. And the big thing is I want people to give themselves permission to step away. So here's my story. I'm American Indian. I was born in 1959. I was removed from my family when I was 18 months of age, and it was for neglect. And neglect is kind of one of those words that has a lot of implications to it, and it produces a lot of reactions. In my case, this is what neglect looked like, is I was left in the care of my 6-year-old sister. My birth mom had a habit of leaving for days or weeks or months at a time, and people didn't know where she was. I'm sure that there was an if, whether or not she'd come back. But in this case, I was left with the care of my 6-year-old sister. Somebody called social services. What they found was infected mosquito bites throughout my body. They found open sores in my diaper area. So no idea when my diaper had been changed. I was hungry. They didn't really have a good idea of when I'd last been fed. So I was removed from my family and placed in the care of a guardian for 6 months, and then removed from there and placed with my adoptive family, who consisted of my mom and dad and me. That was it. We lived rural. I grew up in Montana. And growing up in rural Montana, I am very aware of how a lot of Montanans feel about American Indians. And if you live in the Highline states, you probably understand, you probably heard about some of those feelings as well. So that's my beginning. So when I think about adoption, I think of it from an individual standpoint. I think of it as the system with a constellation of players. So the adoptee, the birth family, the birth parent, social workers, guardian ad litems, adoption lawyers, and policymakers. And that's a pretty big constellation, but in a lot of cases, social work deals with that. As a cultural anthropologist, I'm interested in the social and cultural construct that adoption is in kind of the larger view. So this is where I spend most of my time, and this is where my mind churns with questions. So, and typically these questions revolve around the messages that we receive either verbally or non-verbally from the larger society. So what do these questions sound like? I'm going to tell you the questions that I've received, and I bet a lot of you have heard similar types of questions, because mine deals with race. They might be a little bit different, but kind of the end answer results are similar. So when my son introduced me to a girl he'd brought home in high school, her first question to him, while standing only about 5 feet away from me, was, "Is she your stepmom? Because she doesn't look anything like you." Right here. I'm right next to you. A girl in 6th grade asked me, "Why don't you look like your parents?" "I'm adopted." "Oh," she said, "I'm so sorry." Well, I wonder where she heard that before. A rude question. "So what are you?" A more polite question. "What nationality are you?" Both of them are interested in talking about race. "You don't act like you're Native American." Rude question. Or even ruder, "You don't act like other Native Americans." Notice the negative implications. Rudest of all, "Can you show me an Indian dance?" So, those make you really aware of how you do not fit in to the dominant culture. So in my case, as a brown woman walking around a predominantly white space, I have been followed in stores. I have been refused service from cashiers. They'll take other people's money, but they won't take mine. When my kids were acting up in high school, I have been labeled as a misnomer, a poor Hispanic single mom who could not get her kids under control. Again, a brown person. I've been largely ignored when I walk into a group of people who don't look like me. I used to belong to a group called the Mother Center when my kids were little, and it was great. A lot of them were professional women that had decided to stay home and be stay-at-home moms. So the Mother Center was a way of us to continue learning. I learned how to quilt there. We had literature classes, we had language classes, we had a lot of things. And I used to be in charge of doing the newsletter. So one day I come in and we've got to work like crazy to get the newsletter out in the mail. So I volunteered to come in and help do that. Normally I'm behind the scenes. So I come in, volunteer leads me to a group of 4 women. She introduces me and they look at me and I say hi and they say hi back. And I say, "How is everybody?" And they say fine. And then they start talking to other people around them. And they don't include me in the conversation. When I try to insert myself, it's just like a one answer question. And I realized at that point, what was being said was not, "We don't like you," but it probably sounded more like, "We don't have anything in common with you, so I doubt we have much to talk about." And it would be uncomfortable to try to go there with those conversations. So, those are some more ideas of how you don't necessarily fit in. So when I made contact with my tribe, it was amazing how similar that was. "Where are you from?" When I answered which town, they asked which reservation. Luckily, I knew the reservation. "Who's your family?" When I answered I didn't know, they asked, "What do you mean you don't know your family? Everybody knows their family." Rude question. "Why do you talk funny?" More polite question. "You don't sound like you're indigenous," meaning I didn't have the reservation dialect. That sounds a lot like something from upper Minnesota or Wisconsin. "What do you mean you don't know your language?" "Do you know anything about where you came from?" "No." "Well, I can't help you." So as a constant, we have this constant pressure of where we aren't supposed to be or where we don't belong. So we end up in this in-between space that is cramped and uncomfortable and isolating and invisible. So what are we left with is that we aren't white, we aren't biological, we aren't ethnic, and we aren't familiar with our culture, and we aren't, and we aren't, and we aren't. So this is the deficit model, and psychologists love the deficit model. They love to explore what we are not and what we probably will never be. And as a result, we get stigmatized with all kinds of medicalizations. You know, we have a lot of mental health issues. We have, depression. We have suicidal thoughts. We have anger. We have a lot of things. And I think the thing that irritates me about the psychology deficit model is we live up to that, because that's the expectation. Now, it's not to say that those feelings and those reactions aren't real. They are real. But for too long, they've been placed on our shoulders. They've been placed on our shoulders as adoptees because we lack these things. Therefore, these are the problems that we live with. And I would like to come back and say, yeah, I don't buy it. The thing is that it's not that I have the problem. Society has the problem with me. I don't belong in these spaces. So I'm going to make you feel bad about thinking you do. And even though maybe that's not overtly said, those are the messages that we hear all too often. So when I was doing my research on American Indian transracial adoption, I did this back in the early 2000s. I heard a lot of similar stories about rejection by the adoptive or by the birth family, rejection by the adoptive family, rejection by the tribe, shame of our brown skin, being made to feel shame by being disciplined in such way that that would bring about that reaction. And I also heard just horribly, horribly abusive stories by the adoption family. One woman I spoke with, when she got in trouble, her parents had sled dogs. So when she got in trouble, the sled dogs came in and she went out and lived in the kennel for 3 days. And she ate out of the dog bowl. And when she contacted me, she was contacting me with her therapist by her side because the therapist felt that it would be healing for her to tell her story to someone who would listen. I heard abusive stories by birth family. I also heard adoptees tell stories of just fabulous stories of their adoptive family and how they had been accepted in their communities and how they'd been accepted into the larger family and how they had gone home and received an honoring ceremony for coming home and received a naming, by coming home to their tribes. And so when I went into that research, I went in at first thinking, wow, this is like a really, really similar story that we're all talking. But then as I talked to more and more people, I realized, man, our perceptions and our reactions are so unique. And the only thing we have in common is that we have been removed from our family and we've been placed into a family that does not look like us. So when I speak out, I absolutely have to be cognizant of all of those other stories because they're important. And they're important for people to hear a variety of stories. And the thing is that some of these stories, and I'm going to keep coming back to social media. Tonight is a hammer social media night for me. I'm going to keep coming back to these stories because a lot of them do not match the narrative that social media seems to have, and that we all are encouraged / forced to get on the same page with. So I have to be careful. I think all of us have to be careful when we talk about our issues. we have to make sure that we speak only for ourselves. We can't speak for anybody else. Our adoptions are unique, and our placement on the spectrum of relationships and reactions are unique. The only shared experience, like I said, is the placement from one family to another. And the reasons for these placements run the gamut, from dangerous situations. I would call mine a dangerous situation. There are far more dangerous situations. To a birth mother gifting her child to someone else to raise because for whatever reason she can't do that. And when I say gifting, it means that she is a part of that child's life. And I've heard all of the stories in between those things. And we have to remember that when we tell our stories, they're going to resonate with some people and they're not going to resonate with others. But that doesn't mean that we get to go out and share only those stories that fit our agenda, because then it becomes biased and we start not honoring a lot of the things that are going on. And I don't think that's what anybody wants to do. I know that that's not what I want to do. So I try to keep in mind is that regardless of the person's experience, if they decide to tell their story, it is an act of strength and fearlessness in order to put that story out into the larger society. When I decided to write Bitterroot, it took me 3 years to decide how badly I wanted to cut myself open, fillet myself, and lay myself out for public consumption because I knew that that's what I was going to do. One of the things I think is important is we as adoptees, we like to romanticize our birth families. I think a lot of us really like to romanticize our birth families. Because if we don't fit in this if we don't fit in our family, or if we don't fit into this larger society, then surely we can find a place to fit. And our birth family is going to be the natural place. And believe me, I say that because I had rose-colored glasses welded to my face. I was like, they were going to be the living end. And when I went home, they were going to be a Hallmark moment. So the thing is that, what does that Hallmark moment look like? The Hallmark moment looks like blood recognizes blood. And we run into one another's arms, and there's sobbing, and there's joy, and there's words like, oh my gosh, you've come home. We have missed you. We have been wondering where you are. And that's kind of not how that happened for me. When I met my family, I was 33 years old. I had a family that I myself had created, my very own family. My siblings had families that they created. And all of a sudden, I met my birth mom. And what I realized is I wasn't meeting my family so much as I was meeting shame. My birth mom had so much shame that she could not be the person that she wanted to be as a parent. She could not do that for whatever reason. The tribe, the extended family, and the tribe had so much shame that they couldn't keep their kids. By 1972, through a soft assimilation government program called the Indian Adoption Project, between 25 and 35% of American Indian kids had been removed from native homes and placed into predominantly non-native homes. That is almost 1/3 of a culture. When you place 1/3 of the children of any culture, you are stealing its future. So all of a sudden you've got these people who are like, we couldn't keep the kids. Well, part of the reason they couldn't keep the kids is a lot of issues from colonization. And part of it was The US government didn't want him to keep their kids. We've been under attack by the US government for a long time, for hundreds of years. So it's by design. So, what we ended up looking at is, I had to admit that instead of this Hallmark moment, we kind of looked at each other with curiosity. And we all kind of wondered, like, are we going to look alike? Would we have similar gestures? Would we have similar ways of speaking? And when I met them, there's, 9 of us. We have 4 different fathers. We didn't really share a lot of physical characteristics. What we shared was being Indian, racist white America. So I think one of the things that was interesting is my siblings, the people, there's 4 who stayed with our birth mom. And then the 2 elder went with other family members. 3 of us were removed and placed with outside people. And then 4 were raised with Vic. We sit around and we kind of have these conversations about whose life was worse. Because all 3 of us that were placed out had received abuse. My youngest brother was abused by his older brother and by his mom. And my older sister was heinously abused by her mom. Her mom was crazy. She would do things like, I have this story in the book where Ronnie was 6 years old. She comes home from school. Anybody who is, of my generation knows that when you came home from school, you changed into your play clothes because you had school clothes and then you had play clothes. So she goes downstairs, she changes into her play clothes, she comes upstairs, she does whatever it is. She's getting ready to eat dinner, and her mom says, "So what did you do with your school dress?" And she says, "Well, I hung it up." She said, "Well, are you sure you hung it up?" And my sister said at that point she couldn't eat because she knew if she didn't know what happened to that dress, that there was going to be a beating. And so she runs downstairs and she's looking for it, and it's not where she thought she put it. Well, I have a tad bit of ADHD. There are a lot of things that I put places. I have no idea where I put them 5 minutes later. But it's not on the floor. It's not in any of her drawers. She cannot find it. And she's starting to get frantic. So her mom comes downstairs and says, "Well, don't worry about it." And she said, "Oh my gosh, I've been let off the hook. This is amazing." So she goes upstairs, takes a bath, and she says she's just starting to relax. And her mom comes upstairs, grabs her out of the tub by her hair, marches her downstairs. She's walking through the house naked and gets her downstairs in her room. And she said, "Do you know where I found this?" And she extracts the dress from one of those fold-up cots, those fold-up beds that was in a guest bedroom. And Ronnie is just like, she said, I didn't put it there. There's no reason it should have been there. So that's the type of thing that her mom did, is she would move things around on Ronnie, and then she would kind of go into the kill. It was, as a result, Ronnie grew up feeling unloved, feeling isolated, feeling unlovable. To have a relationship with Ronnie is what I describe dancing with a whirlwind. You just never knew where you were going to be at any given time. And Ronnie passed away last April, and I miss her to this day. She was a bright spot in my life. So, we would tell stories about which life was worse, abuse or neglect. And every so often I would have to ask myself the story, would I have accomplished the same things that I've accomplished if I'd stayed in that family? And the thing is that if I have to be super honest, I can't say as I would have. You know, I am the only person of my siblings that graduated high school. I'm the only person, of course, that went to college. I live in a safe neighborhood. Um, I have safe friends. You know, I have access to jobs and access to resources. I have, I have access. I hope to inform people and change minds. I have a lot of things that I don't think I would have had I stayed there. A few years ago, I was keynoting at a social work conference, and this smug adoption lawyer stands up and he says, he said, I don't think you've done too bad for yourself. He said, in fact, I pretty much guarantee that if you hadn't been placed out, you wouldn't be standing up on a podium having a conversation at this conference. And you know what? He's right. I wouldn't have, because I have received all those other things. But what I ended up saying to him is, you're right. I did receive, all these other resources. I did receive an education. I did receive the ability to sit at the table. I have a chair at the table to be able to talk about these things. But the thing is I paid a high price for that chair at the table. And that's what you need to keep in mind. So, the thing is when we question ourselves, when we question where we come from, when we question who we come from, that's a really, really important part of our healing, because it helps us not only establish identity, but it also is probably the first time that we've taken that action on our own, prior to whatever time, like, for me, it was in my 40s. Some people, it's a lot earlier, but for me in my 40s, that was the first time I felt comfortable enough in myself to go against my parents' opinion and popular opinion and claim who I was. I'm an American Indian, Indigenous woman, and like it or not, this is what that means. My dad was furious when I went looking for my family. My adoptive dad was furious. My mom was supportive, but she didn't want to meet anybody. And so I can't fault her for that. I mean, I try to put myself in her shoes, and I wonder how I would have reacted. And I guess that's the piece that I always try to do, is I really try to put myself in the shoes of the other person, knowing what I know about them, and think, would I have reacted the same way? So yeah, in this search, we are claiming ourselves. We are claiming an identity. We're not asking permission. But we keep kind of stopping it, wondering what our lives would have been like if. I think we just keep coming back to that question. So, when we want to answer this if question, we do a lot of things, right? We journal, we write, we draw, we paint, we tell stories, we write one-act plays, we research, we talk to groups, we put forth ideas and listen to feedback. We make presentations at conferences, we do podcasts. We go into therapy, we join adoptee groups, we feel seen and heard and felt, and we stumble out of these dark places. We are finally validated. But this is where, for me, something happened. As I began to accumulate the puzzle pieces of my life, the picture I thought I was building was not the picture that emerged. Literally, I thought if I did therapy, I could like dust off my hands and say, okay, got that taken care of, got that figured out. I thought if I did the research and if I did the study and if I wrote the book, okay, fine, did that, got it figured out, I'm good, I can move on. I wrote Bitterroot. Yes, got that accomplished. I'm fine. I can move on. And the thing is that I can't. There is something that doesn't allow me to just drop everything and move on. And some of the puzzle pieces just don't fit the picture that I've constructed. And we destabilize. We destabilize when therapy doesn't work forever, and we kind of keep having to go back. When the research we produced provides far more questions than it does answers. When the book leads to talks and presentations that place us back into dark spaces, the places that we had thought we would leave behind. And when we cycle into darkness, we start holding a lot of people responsible and accountable for changing that picture and putting us in these spaces. We get angry, we get sad, we get frustrated, we lash out. We start to come to the realization that our reunifications are not happy ever after. They might last a few meetings, they might last a few months. If we're lucky, they last a few years. We realize we're not family meeting one another, we're strangers. We also realize that if the relationship continues, it's because we as the adoptees are doing heavy lifting. Because you know what? They don't need us as much as we need them. They already have their families. They have their aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews and children and grandchildren living right there. They have people every day who tell them and remind them who they are. We're the only ones that really need that validation. They've got it. So that means that if we want a relationship, we've got to do the calling. We've got to do the reaching out. We've got to be the vulnerable ones. That gets old. But that's just, you suck it up and you do it. So I'm going to be honest. Something happened recently in social media that I realized I want to get off the merry-go-round. It has produced a lot of chaos. And social media, if you speak about adoption as much as I've spoken about adoption, that's just the natural go-to place. So, and it's so fickle. It is so fickle. I've been invisible. I've been sought out. I've been loved. I've been dismissed. I've been discarded. It's like having a bad lover. It really is. One day I was commenting on a tweet, and it was this guy who said something along the lines of, it really made him angry that, the government would come in and rip away your identity. And, I can't remember everything else. And so, I tried to change the story by saying, I think that adoptions like those in Oceania would be a good thing to consider if we want to make adoption changes. At which point he's like, well, that's not what I'm saying. It's like, well, I know that. And then it was like a dog pile. And it wasn't just a few people, it was a lot of people. And it was like, you don't know what the frick you're talking about. And how, why don't you just go find somebody else and blah, 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 blah. And it's just kind of like, I sat there and I thought, man, I've been doing this for 25 years. Like, I didn't like how that felt. I felt attacked. And what that did was that destabilized me, and it put me back into those dark places that I thought that I had left behind, because you know what? I took care of that. I've moved on, but I did not. And the thing about jumping off the merry-go-round is it's scary because you don't know where you're going to land. It's going fast. That merry-go-round is going fast. You don't know where it's going to land. And I can remember, this was several years ago. This was when I not long after I first started doing my own research, I was talking with a man who would become a friend of mine. At the time, he was just another adoptee. And, I was starting my research. And so I was asking all these adoptee questions and adoption questions. And, he kept with the conversation. But finally, he looked at me and he said, I'm not really interested in adoption like a lot of people. And I thought, what do you mean you're not interested in adoption? Like, you're an adoptee. This is our lives. This is who we are. Like, how do you not want to talk about this? And he just said at the time something that I didn't really spend much time thinking about. He said, I am so much more than an adoptee. And it was just like, yeah. And I just kept coming back to that, especially as I am in this space now. So, I've researched, I've written about, I've talked about, I've workshopped about adoption, like I said, for 25 years. And I am so tired. And I keep feeling like I can't escape the darkness. I'm not allowed to escape that darkness. I'm no longer an active member in the community. In the community where I live, I don't do a lot of volunteer stuff. I don't run groups like I used to. I don't even write in the ways that I used to write. I find my voice has shut down quite a bit. And I find a lot of people don't want to have the same conversations I do. And my conversations lately have turned from complaining about what I don't have to a situation of self-acceptance. It's moved from wishing so badly that something else had been different, to looking at the gifts that even have come in really dark packages as gifts. And it requires me to step aside and really look at these things from a way different part of a perspective. And part of that is, when we're trying to work our way through a puzzle, when we're trying to work our way through a problem, sometimes we are so close to it that we can't see anything out. We can't even see anything out of the periphery. So this is what happened. I didn't know how to extricate myself from being drawn into the darkness. So as I'm sitting one day feeling pretty low, I was thinking about the lowest I'd ever felt in my life. And this was a few years ago. And my son and daughter-in-law and their infant were living with us. They were saving money while they got ready to move into a house. And he'd come down extremely ill, and he had to be moved into Children's Hospital. Well, he was waiting for a pediatric liver that never came. And 3 weeks before he died, I was diagnosed. It was the day before Thanksgiving. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And 3 weeks after he died, it was New Year's Day, and I was diagnosed with uterine cancer. And I can remember talking with that doctor, and he's like, oh my God, I am so sorry that I have to deliver this news. I am so sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. You don't get a choice about when you have to deliver news. I mean, I'm like trying to make him feel okay because literally I had put my hands up and I said, I am done trying to control anything. I am done. And so that year was, surgeries and chemotherapy and radiation. And then it was me trying to get used to this new being that I was, this post-cancer being. And at that point, I remember just becoming really Zen. And I don't mean the religious part of it with the rituals and things. I mean the philosophical part. And the thing that I come back to is, it is what it is. And a lot of people that I've come across, really dislike that saying, because what they hear it saying is, yeah, well, that's just the way it is, nothing we can do about it, and just kind of being a flippant dismissal of whatever. And what it is it is the beginning of something that you have to find a follow-up for. It is what it is. You can't change what has brought you to this place. So now what are you going to do from this moment on? And so when I started thinking about adoption, that, like, I can't change anything. I can't change the way that my birth family was. I can't change the way that my adoptive family was. I can't change the reactions people had to me as I was growing up in racist Montana. I can't change the attitudes and the beliefs of people who felt I was somehow not to be allowed in certain spaces. I can't change any of that, but what can I change from this point on? So I will continue to talk. I will continue to speak. I am not going to get drawn into the arguments that don't produce active listening and active thinking and imagination about what things could be. That's what you have to do. Absolutely nothing changes without imagining what something will look like. You have to have something to work for. But in the meantime, I've also stepped away, and I realized, you know what? I am something more than adoptee. I am a aunt, and I am a niece, and I am a cousin, and I am a mother, and I am a grandmother, and I am an active member of the community, and I'm a writer, and I'm a bread baker, and I'm a gardener, and I make pies, and I quilt, and I love talking to people, and I love being around children because they give me a sense of a future that is so freaking hopeful. And especially teenagers. I love teenagers. They're a pain in the butt. Everybody knows that. But the thing is that they're trying to figure out the world, and they're trying to make sense of this world. And they still need to be guided through this chaos that we as the adults have somehow created. And so I keep coming back to that, as I am more than an adoptee. And so when I talk about coming out of the Riptide, I look at, we come out of the fog, right? We have an awareness that maybe our life wasn't hunky-dory, that maybe there were some problems, and maybe there were significant problems. And after trying to figure it out, and after trying to manipulate it, and after trying to do all these things, I realized I was in a riptide. I was in a riptide of chaos that I just could not pull myself out of. It just kept churning me over and over and over. And by the time I was able to touch sand, I didn't know which side was up. I didn't know where I had lost myself. I had absolutely lost myself. So this is why I'm sharing this story, is coming out of the riptide means that I've given myself permission to step aside, and I've given myself permission to once more revisit all these other things that not only I used to be, but that I want to become once more, because I need hope. I need a lot of hope. So good luck to you.
Thank you. I think there show of hands here. How many can relate to the riptide of chaos? We can, right? We're there. Thank you, Susan, so much for sharing your story.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, it was a tough one to write because, you know, you're speaking against the grain on so many levels, but it's not like I was ever a grain going with person, but you know, it's you tiptoe around sometimes. Sometimes you just learn to tiptoe around because it's easier than feeling the, you know, the consequences of not doing that.
And I think so many here with us tonight as well can resonate with parts of your story. Social media, how many of us have been beat up out there and had that that same situation where nobody was listening. You know, but we are the owners of our own narratives.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, it's basically we have to come to that place of acceptance and accept what we cannot control and the things that we can. And where do we want to live? What space do we want to, you know, where do we want to be?
And who do we want to be?
Who do we want to be? That's exactly right. Well, I know we've got some individuals out there that would love to ask you some questions. So I would like to open that up to our audience and see who would like to ask Susan the first question. No, we always start out slow.
I know. And, you know, I always tell people, ask what you want, because there has been no question that I have been asked. I mean, I've been asked it all. And, you know, as I tell people, as long as it's respectful, like we need to have conversations about the most sensitive topics, because how else do you lay all your cards on the table to figure out what you have to work with?
Mhm.
I learned that in therapy.
Okay. Anybody want to open up?
Well, I do see a lot of, you know, that Riptide to Chaos has really struck a chord. And I am so grateful to hear other people say that. Because, and I don't know, it looks like we're all mature adults, should I say. I can't see everybody here, but maybe it's an age thing, you know, maybe we do get to a certain point. It's just like, okay, you know, I don't have to necessarily play by the rules. I'm not asking permission to leave the rules behind.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have to grow up.
Can I ask something? I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
I was just going to say it's one thing to go against the grain, which I've always done, but it's quite another thing to actually talk about what happened to you. Because I didn't talk about it for a long time. And then when I did, it made me very uncomfortable to talk about it. And then people don't believe you or don't respond well, or try to shut you down and say, well, was it that bad? So my favorite response.
I know. And that's, you know, I think when we decide that we want to, I think when we decide that we know who we are, like I can remember in my 40s, this is who I am. And I am tired of having people tell me who I am and who I am not. And at that point, I had such a foundational connection with where my feet were beneath me that you could throw anything at me and then we were going to have a conversation, and it was not going to go well. but you know, it's and what I found out for me is I had to extend so much grace. So for instance, I might think in my head, God, you know, this person is like a freaking idiot. Why do they think that? Why do they think that I would find what they said in any way respectful. And then what I had to do is I would have to reframe that to, this is something this person doesn't know about, and they don't know how to ask the questions, and they feel uncomfortable even broaching a subject that they may or may not have strong feelings about. So if I extended grace, I would be able to answer them, not like they were an idiot, but like they were a second grader who had never understood this problem from a simplistic standpoint.
Now, how do you do that? Excuse me. How do you do that when it's somebody who tells you, I have a friend who's adopted and this is what they say, so you can't be right?
And then you can say, well, that's your friend's story. I have a different story, and both of us can be right.
I like that one. That's a good.
Yeah. I mean, you can, I think the biggest thing I learned is I'm not going to win. I
Right.
can't go out there thinking I'm going to win, because that never produces good results. And believe me, I've tried. So, when I talk about humility and when I talk about grace, those are those hard lessons that I've learned along the way.
Thank you, Robin. I did receive a private message asking the question, Susan. It says, is it time for the world to adjust to adoptees rather than adoptees adjusting to the world? Ooh.
I think that's a fabulous question. And, and I think that's just it, is that, we have to somehow, we have been put into this space where we have to prove our value and our worth because we don't fit a cultural narrative of who we should be. And when I say that cultural narrative, what we as a society believe is that children are related by blood. So if you're not related by blood, well, then that's a problem. That makes somebody uncomfortable. That family is family above all else. Well, if you come from a dysfunctional family, that's fallacy. If you go into a dysfunctional family, that's a fallacy. And so, come on, we belong in we are part of a society that likes the easy answers. They like the easy, the yes or no answers, black or white, this or that, good or bad. You can see it in every level of our society. They don't want answers that blur the edges. Those are not helpful. They're helpful to understanding a lot of things, but for people who just want to get things done, they're not helpful. So, and I think, that's the other piece, is that we have to be discerning about who we tell our stories to. And Anne Lamott, I think, has a fabulous thing. Has somebody earned the right to hear your story? I really like that. I took it. I mean, I really like it because not everybody has earned the right to hear your story.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Anne Lamott too.
I know, her and Brene Brown.
Right.
So, I see this one. There must be a balance of wanting people to understand our lives and wanting to keep our lives private. It's hard to find that balance. It really is. I mean, it is totally. It's like I said, when I had, I took 3 years to decide how badly I wanted to flay myself and lay myself open for public consumption. Because, when you talk publicly about something, you're going to get naysayers. You're
Absolutely.
going to get people who don't think that, number one, you should be talking about that. That's private. Number two, you should be talking about that because that makes them uncomfortable. Number three, you shouldn't be talking about that because it's not helpful to anybody. I mean, they have all these things, and we have to decide. I think probably for me, the biggest thing is, why are we talking about it? For me, for Bitterroot, when I wrote Bitterroot, it was designed to validate other adoptees, other American Indian transracial adoptees, but it was also designed to inform adoptive parents of what their child might be experiencing out of their gaze. It was designed to help teachers understand when they teach American history, what that child hears, and if that's not a history that they share, what that does to an identity. It's designed to help social workers understand when they place a child that there's all these other questions that come up. And it was designed for policymakers to understand this is not an easy, oh, we'll take care of this problem by doing this. I mean, my focus for Bitterroot was a very specific focus. And I think anytime we tell our story, it should be for a very specific reason where we can control the conversation.
We have some questions coming in, Susan. Melissa Bennett, would you please take yourself off of mute? And then we have Sarah Easterly.
Hello, Susan. Thank you so much for being here and being present with us tonight. It is just really wonderful to hear your story. As a fellow Native adoptee, transracial adoptee, I just resonate so much with what you're saying and the experiences of being in between. And I'm also a writer, and I've been working on a memoir that originally I was like, oh, this is going to be about my grandma and part of her life. And of course, as I started writing and exploring more of my biological family, finding that there's 5 generations in my family of mothers and daughters in a matrilineal culture that weren't connected. And so, of course, when I try to write that, I can't write it without writing my adoption story. And so this book very quickly went from me saying, there's no way I'm writing a book about my adoption to, oh my gosh, this whole thing is about my adoption. So my question is, as you were writing and as you were really opening yourself up in these deep ways to this part of you that is identity, what were the practices that you used or came back to in order to keep going when it got really hard?
Wine.
Check.
Okay, I've got a story on this. So when I decided I was going to do creative nonfiction, I didn't really know what that was. So I went and I took a class on it. The professor, not knowing how much writing or how much ability I had, put me into a senior level creative writing nonfiction class. And at the time I was like really annoyed because I had a graduate degree, and it's like, talk about ego, like, okay, check the ego. And so I was in this class, and I mean, I was so glad I was in there because it was filled with, I was totally the oldest person in there. I was in my early 50s. But the thing is it was filled with such thoughtful people. So I'd been asked to write this lyric essay, and I love lyric essay because it's very poetry. And I don't do lyric essays well, because they're 75% poetry and a little bit of things that glue it all together. But I wrote this one called The Wall in the Garden, and it was a metaphor. My dad was the wall and I was the garden, and he forbade the sun from coming so much onto the garden that the garden wasn't able to produce healthy, nutritious, anything, pretty things. And I had one sentence in there about, my dad and I had a contentious relationship. That was like the only non-metaphorical thing I said. So it went out for workshop with the class, and to a person, they all said, wow, this was really good, but I'm interested in the contentious relationship you had with your dad. I'm telling you, I was furious. I was so angry. And I had to do a rewrite Tuesday. So this is Thursday. Friday, I'm livid. How dare they? How dare they think that I am going to give them what my relationship was? I told them as much as I needed them to know. I'm not going to tell them squat. How dare they? How dare they think that they can get that from me? Saturday, I was just like whack-a-mole nuts. It's like, I don't care what they want to know. I've told them what they need to know. They don't need to know anything more. Sunday, it was just more of the same. But then now I'm starting to panic because I've got to have something ready to turn in Tuesday that reflects their comments. So Monday night I sat down. It's like, fine. They want to know what my contentious looks like. This is what my contentious looks like. And what it had to do with was shame, right? It had to do with my dad's abuse. It had to do with his physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And I didn't want to write about that because I didn't think it was anybody's business. The thing is that if you introduce a topic, you have to tell the truth of that topic. How much of it you want to relay is up to you, but people do want the truth. And when I brought it up for workshop the second time, they were like, wow, now we understand what the meaning of that poem was. And what that became was in memory in the chapter in memory and Bitterroot. But, I kept coming back when things started getting hard. I kept coming back to, what am I trying to say with this? Why should people care? I also was lucky because Vern, my brother, my tribal cop brother, read every single chapter as I wrote it. And also he read the entire book before I put it to press, because I felt if I was saying anything in there that was inappropriate or disrespectful, he would be the first to tell me. And the one thing that I really worked on doing was my ethic was, I wanted to write a story that allowed everybody to keep as much dignity as possible. Because when we write these kinds of stories, there's all kinds of ways that we can strip away what little dignity might be left. And I keep coming back to Eat, Pray, Love. I hate that book. And I dislike that book so much because the first thing she does in order to find herself is throw her ex-husband under the bus. And it's just like, you cannot, in my world, start a memoir where you blame somebody else for choices that you need to make yourself. Does that help?
It does. It does, definitely. Thank you so much. I feel
Good
like
luck. It's so good to see you again.
thank you. My hands up to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, Sarah.
Okay. Hi, Susan. So nice
Hi,
to see
Sarah.
you.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Great talk. Well, and I just, as you were talking, I hope this is relevant to everybody else, but I was just reflecting on when we first made connection with each other, it was because I had been tossed into the riptide of chaos over something I had written, and I got in that social media chaos, and you were such a light for me to help keep me out of the darkness. at that time. So I just want to thank you and just say, I'm sorry I missed you getting tossed into that darkness. And I wish I could have reciprocated, because that just makes me mad and I want to fight for you. And I guess this is more of I guess it's kind of a question, but when you put your hands in the air and say good luck, and I'm, there's more to me. I have to tell you, my adoptee abandonment stuff is alive, because we need you in this space. Like, we need you, like your sage wisdom and your expertise and your studies from decades. I just, there is that mature thinking that I know is, if you present it on social media when there isn't mature thinking, I think you can get eaten alive, but that doesn't mean it's not needed. And so I guess, what does taking a step back look like for you? And how do we keep you in this space and support you?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because the last couple of talks I've done, I write these, they're like Venn diagrams. And so they help me just, okay, here's a topic. I want to talk about this and this and this and this. And then here's a topic, that's how these are related. And here's one. And as I keep coming through, I keep thinking, I sense another book. I sense another book that is different from mixing cultural identities, and that is different than the memoir, because I think I still haven't talked to a group that I want to talk to yet, which is researchers. And I think research is, I'm going to be honest, I think research is part of the problem. With psychology, it's just they keep coming back to the individual, and it's not about the individual. And social work has their stuff that they're trying to deal with, but it's far larger than social work. And, I'm surprised I figured somebody would take my research and run with it. And I've just not seen a lot that introduces that social cultural piece. And I think it is such an important piece, because it comes down to, what does it mean to be adopted in the United States? And there's all kinds of hidden meanings in that action. So I'm not all the way done. I'm frustrated. I'm licking my wounds. I think for me, stepping away is being asked to be part of conversations rather than just stick my neck out there. I have to take my own advice. Be careful about who you tell your stories to. Not everybody's ready to hear what so many of us have to say. They're not ready. And I think that's the other piece, is that how do you have a conversation to minds that haven't been primed to understand what this conversation may be about? But thank you for your words of support. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to hear about that. I'm glad there's another book coming.
Oh, there's at least one.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, as we're winding down, do we have any other questions for Susan? Again, her book is called Bitter Root. I know that we placed the link in the chat room. If you're interested in checking out her book, please do so. And also, she has a wonderful TEDx talk that is available as well. Any last minute questions before we wind down? Well, Susan, thank you.
I have a follow-up.
Go ahead, Rich.
So, I appreciate Sarah's question to you, and also, implore that, you maintain some kind of presence in the area. But thinking about one of your frustrations here, do you think that it's because academia is a little bit siloed? You've got your social workers, you've got your psychologists who are really just interested in the brain of one, even though we may be looking at multiples. And so really to take the baton, would be a sociologist or a cultural anthropologist or, some kind of ethnographer, in some way. And those, like when you look at the pecking order of academia, those are not always as highly regarded as a psychologist.
I know.
So
They aren't. They aren't. They aren't because like I said, I'm still an affiliate at Colorado State University, and the psychology department just walks on water. I mean, they really do. And while the social science of anthropology just is begging for money in every place they can find. But the thing is that I also think that psychology reduces a lot of those questions, a lot of their research of, is, do you do this or do you not? Into yes, no. And I can say that because I was a research associate with the psychology department on several studies. And the stuff that we put together already assumed certain things were true. So for instance, drug use on the reservations, that was going to be the truth from where they started asking every question they came up with. Well, when you start sitting down and talking with different reservations, maybe drug use wasn't the top problem that they were concerned about. Maybe it was domestic violence. Maybe it was not use, but cartels. Maybe it was trafficking, that their young women were disappearing in trafficking. But we weren't interested in those questions. And so I think being part of sociology or being part of anthropology, we blur the lines on a lot of things, and it's not valued. That's not a valuable commodity in American society. So
that's probably part of the larger problem.
Yeah.
Finding the value there, instead of.
So I just think we need to get our voices out, and we need to get them out, not so much in academia, but in kind of in the larger sphere. I think sometimes we don't change things through academic knowledge. We change things through public perception. That's where we start those grassroots conversations.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Okay, anybody else?
Well, thank
Okay.
you so much. I so appreciate being invited, and this has been a fabulous group, and I enjoyed hearing the feedback and the questions and having the conversations here, because it fills my soul. I need to hear this too.
Well, we loved having you this evening with us, Susan, and we appreciate you coming on. And we will, at the end of this call, we will be sending you a copy of the chat room so you can see the comments.
Great.
At your leisure. And then, of course, again, this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel that you can share in your social circles, and for those that weren't able to attend this evening. So we really appreciate you coming on this evening. So thanks again.
Okay, I hope to see y'all later.
Okay, we're going to do some closing comments.
Okay.
And if you want to stick around, you can.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, why don't you do that for us? Okay, so I'm waiting for the screens to come up here. Just give me just a second here. Beth or Jennifer one.
Beth was gonna screen share. It's not letting me share. It says only the host can share. There
Thanks,
she
Jen.
goes.
Okay, next Friday, we will have Damon Davis. Who am I really? He'll be joining us for our happy hour next Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you want to mark your calendars, and hopefully all of you will be able to join us and learn all about Damon. So I haven't met him personally myself. So this is a new contact. So I'm looking forward to next Friday, and we will be coming live from Florida. So I'll be in Florida along with Jennifer next Friday night. We're going to be in South Florida. So we'll be coming live to you from there. Okay. And then support groups coming up. We have David Bowles' Adoptee Paths to Recovery for Tuesday, the November 16th. Okay, there's David. Adoptee Paths to Recovery. Again, that will be Tuesday the 16th at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And then also that same evening, and I'll wait. We just love technology.
It's here and then it's gone. Just a second. There we go.
Quite all right. Okay, and then again, we have Dr. Joyce that same evening, and she will begin her support group at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So everyone here is welcome to join us. There will be an Evite that's going to go out in Eventbrite, so you can sign up for either one of those support groups, and we'd love to have you. And then the last thing I'd like to mention before I dismiss everyone is, again, NAAP does want to thank you for your consistent attendance. We've got a core group that comes every Friday evening, and we're meeting more new people. And we really appreciate that. We've been doing this every Friday evening for over a year and a half now. So we're really excited to bring you fresh guests and different perspectives on different topics in the adoption constellation. I know many of you have reached out to us via email. We've had some phone calls on how you can help NAAP and wanting to make contributions. And so we're going to try and make that a little easier for you. So next week, you'll probably see a difference on our Eventbrite invite. Make it easy. If anyone wants to give, they are more than welcome to make a donation. If you're able to, that's fine, because we do love coming here every Friday night, and we want to keep doing so. So you'll just notice that change in your Evite next week. And I just wanted to share that with you. So with that, everybody have a great rest of your evening and a wonderful weekend, and hope to see you next Friday. Bye, everybody.